Pokémon Stadium, a revolutionary battle simulator for the Nintendo 64 that took the Pokémon craze from a portable 2D medium into the cutting-edge 3D plane. Complete with 3D models of all 151 Pokémon at the time, and flashy visuals of their battle modes. Oh my gosh, what is it doing? With all the content packed in this game, like several battle modes, addictive mini-games, and the ability to transfer your own team from the Game Boy into the arena, you hardly noticed that Pokémon Stadium lacked a full adventure mode. Released in North America and Europe in the spring of 2000, this was the definitive Pokémon experience for the N64.
Come on now, dawg.
But what if I told you this game was actually a sequel? Yes, the original Japanese title for this game is Pokémon Stadium 2. In Japan, they received a whole other game 2 years prior known as Pocket Monsters Stadium. Released in August of 1998, it was Pokémon's very first spin-off and the true debut of the monsters in 3D. But it's a very different and much more bare-bones game than the one we remember here. Between the release of Game Freak's widely successful Pocket Monsters Red and Green in Japan and its sequels was a calculated blitz by the trio of companies that launched the Pokémon brand: Nintendo, Game Freak, and Creatures Inc., all striking while the iron was hot. I highly recommend checking out my previous video for a very exhaustive overview on how Pokémon came to be, but in this video we'll be talking about the many experimental spin-offs of Pokémon Generation 1, as they stress tested the brand to see how far they could take these lovable monsters outside of this RPG form, whether it was on a pinball table, a card mat, or a 3D arena. Western fans often experience these games out of release order, which looking back doesn't matter too much, but to see the lightning in a bottle strategy as it actually happened, we're gonna follow the Japanese release timeline. Starting with the game that proved Pokémon had a future on the home console. Pocket Monsters Stadium. I'll be totally honest with you guys, I did not know this game existed before I researched this video.
Stupid.
The more you know. The gameplay mechanics themselves may not come as a surprise to you, but similarly to battles that take place in the Game Boy titles, Pocket Monsters Stadium is strictly based around those turn-based mechanics where you have to strategically plan out the moves, types, or Pokémon you want to use against your opponent. But unlike the Game Boy games, there are all these cool animations for the moves that you get to see fully play out on the console. The sounds of the excited crowd in the background, and even commentary from an announcer. All these things gave battles that aura that was missing in the Game Boy titles. The primary campaign takes place within tournament mode, where you would select 6 Pokémon to battle numerous computer-controlled trainers. And although there are 6 Pokémon in your team, only 3 could be selected for each battle. The groundbreaking part of Stadium is that with a Nintendo 64 transfer pack, you could connect this game to your Game Boy games, whether it be red, green, blue, and even yellow, which would be released in Japan a month after this game. And by connecting the game, you'd be able to register your own Pokémon that you caught in-game, allowing you to import a team to battle in 3D. So of course, if you didn't have a transfer pack or a Pokémon game for whatever reason,
like if you're a broke boy, just say so.
You could register rental Pokémon to your team instead. Pokémon that came with predetermined movesets. This definitely made you feel that FOMO though. Pokémon that weren't yours? Nah, we need to get that transfer pack, baby. Because if you complete this campaign with a Pikachu transferred from your game, you had the opportunity to teach it surf. And looking back at this, I don't understand how we got hazed so badly in the West with the steps to obtain surfing Pikachu, because the criteria here seems much simpler. Tournament mode had certain level restrictions in its 2 divisions. The first were Pokemon with levels between 1 and 30, and ones for levels 50 through 55. And this probably leaves some of you thinking, well, Mentok, couldn't I just bring my level 100 Blastoise to just clear out this entire game? The answer is no. Pocket Monsters Stadium was built around the concept of real-life Pokemon tournaments that occurred in Japan in 1997 and 1998. The first was at Nintendo Cup 97, with several regional tournaments that took place in various locations across Japan, with a rule set that was particular on having battles with Pokemon being in the specific level range of 50 through 55. Only 6 Pokemon could be locked into your tournament team, and only 3 could be selected per battle to stay within time constraints. Sound familiar? And for each battle, participants had a total level cap of 155 between these 3 Pokemon, meaning players had to make strategic choices on the Pokemon they picked and their levels. And the winners of these regional tournaments would go head-to-head at the national tournament taking place during Nintendo's Space World 97 event, with Toru Miyazawa being the first national champion in Pokemon history, a real-life Trainer Red, with him and the runner-up winning their very own Nintendo 64 consoles. These rules force trainers to think outside of the box and get creative to find hidden gems in the roster that prove to be powerful at lower levels. So it was these exact rule sets that would be the inspiration for tournament mode in Pocket Monster Stadium, and many of the finalists in those tournaments would be featured as trainers you'd battle in-game, complete with their original teams used during the Nintendo Cups. This is cooler than the N64 prize in my opinion, being immortalized in a game forever.
There I am, Gary, there I am!
Of course, in Pocket Monster Stadium, you could also battle against other human players, which is probably the best part of this game format, I think. And you could even use this Game Boy mode to play the Gen 1 titles directly on your N64 as well. But of course, this game wasn't without its downsides. Even though there was a free mode where you could battle opponents with no level restrictions, this game only had 40 available Pokemon that could battle, selected mainly on their popularity within the real-life tournaments. And there was a reason for this. Pocket Monster Stadium was a project taken on by Nintendo and Creatures Inc., while Game Freak was busy focusing on the next generation of Pokemon. This title had big-name producers on it, including Shigeru Miyamoto, creator of Mario and Zelda, Tsunekazu Ishihara of Creatures Inc., who would go on to become the current president of the Pokemon Company, and Satoru Iwata, president of HAL Laboratory at that time, who were responsible for the Kirby franchise, and the man who would go on to become a CEO of Nintendo itself. Meanwhile, the director Takao Shimizu also had a name for himself at Nintendo, responsible for directing Star Fox 64 and Donkey Kong for the Game Boy. But this game started off development as a launch title for the Nintendo 64's Japanese exclusive peripheral, the 64DD, a disk drive that was meant to increase the overall power of the console, but this famously failed, which had Nintendo ultimately cancel its broader launch overseas. Originally, with the DD's capabilities, Stadium had a larger scope, and since they had to scale the project back down to cartridge form, no doubt many features were scaled down along with it. Connectivity with the Pokemon Game Boy games was crucial for Pocket Monster Stadium, and once again Satoru Iwata would put his technical genius to the test. He was responsible for reading the entire source code from the Game Boy games and converting that schematic to a battle system on the Nintendo 64. He did this within a week, and with that it required him to iron out all the compatibility issues with the original games and Stadium single-handedly. Shigeki Morimoto, a programmer at Game Freak, allegedly responded in astonishment, saying, quote, "What kind of company president is this?" Despite his miracle work, the technical limitations allowed only 40 Pokemon being available for battles, and so the team had to select based on their use in those tournaments and specific Pokemon types that needed representation to keep the game balanced. As a consolation, though not exactly a good one, all other Pokemon not in this roster of 40 could be viewed in their 3D glory in a separate mode. So as you can imagine, the game was praised for bringing Pokemon to life in a 3D space, but the lack of content was the game's overall weakness. And if you didn't have Pokemon for Game Boy, this game probably wasn't the best entry into the series for you. Regardless, it sold well and proved that the brand had a place in 3D. And this wasn't the only Pokemon experiment Nintendo was conducting for their N64 system.
Pikachu. Pikachu?
Pikachu!
Released in December of 1998 in Japan, Nintendo launched what is arguably the most ambitious spin-off in the entire Gen 1 library. Instead of commanding Pikachu through buttons, it was time to start talking to him. This is Hey You Pikachu, or Pikachu Genki Dechu in Japan, meaning Pikachu is fine, which proves why direct translations don't always work. But in this title, you are tasked by Professor Oak to test out a device called the Poke Helper that allows you to speak to Pokemon, and that's when you meet this wild Pikachu who you can interact with directly. Once Pikachu gets to know you, it will make the decision that it's going to live with you indefinitely, which leads to you spending time with him across several dates. So think about this for a second. It's 1998, and you are a Japanese kid who's in love with Pokemon. So at this point, you probably already have a Game Boy, at least 2 of the Pokemon Game Boy versions, because come on. A link cable, how are you gonna get that Alakazam without it? An N64 along with Pocket Monster Stadium, and a transfer pack, because what's the point in playing this game without your own Pokemon? And now, you have the latest and greatest Pokemon spin-off, Pikachu is fine. But that wasn't enough, because it requires another accessory called the Nintendo 64 VRU, standing for Voice Recognition Unit. A device that was able to analyze human speech, which at that time was a pretty cool feature. I remember there was this huge push around this time for voice-activated computer technology.
I talk, and my words appear on the computer screen.
Mainly to help out as an accessibility feature, but I also recall it being marketed for folks who just sucked at typing. So here we are with that tech being used for gaming purposes with this shiny new Nintendo 64 VRU. complete with a microphone and this yellow foam color to match Pikachu. So since money is not an issue for this pretend Japanese child that you are right now, we can finally communicate with Pikachu.
Oh, I know. He's cute, isn't he? Little satanic tail.
So the game is fully centered around the VRU, which had the capability of understanding 256 different words. So you'd use it to speak with Pikachu while using the controller to move the camera and pick things up. And you could say things to Pikachu like, come here, or bring that here, to have it obey your movement commands, or you could even praise it for doing a good job. And for some reason they also programmed in things that would piss it off, like when you call it an electric rat.
Electric rat.
There are rumors if you say Sony or Sega, it will also get pissed off, but I think this has been debunked.
PlayStation. Oh shit. Seth, take the mic, it's your fault.
Oh god.
Forgave you?
Oh, okay.
So this title takes place in the Kanto region between Pewter City and Viridian, with all the activities you can perform with Pikachu drawing from an expanded version of that area. The game split up into 3 different difficulties: Pikachu's Discovery Days, Play Days, and Daring Days. And within each difficulty are specific locations with missions you can take on for Pikachu's Pokemon friends, like gathering ingredients in the woods to cook for Bulbasaur, or finding lost Poliwag to bring home to their mother. But as you partake in these activities with Pikachu, you earn Pika Points, which allow you to unlock items that can be used in-game. This was quite the ambitious project, with Tsunekazu Ishihara once again producing this title. Rule of thumb, if there's merchandise you need to buy when it comes to Pokemon, this man had a hand in it. But more on that later. So while Nintendo was responsible for publishing this title, the developer studio was Umbrella, with this being their very first game. They'd go on to be responsible for the Pokemon Rumble series before being fully acquired and dissolved by Creatures Inc. in 2020. Hey You Pikachu was first demonstrated at Nintendo Space World 97 before it was released in Japan in the following year. But this game wouldn't hit stateside until November of 2000, most likely because they had to make the game compatible with the English language.
Pikachu, let's play. Pikachu, dance.
I can't take it anymore.
But ultimately, this game proved to be a little too ambitious and received mixed reviews across the board, with many praising the overall vibe of the game, but having difficulty getting the voice functions to consistently work.
Electric rat.
Pika.
Electric rat.
But I would say this is still a very charming game. You can spend 365 in-game days with this Pikachu until Professor Oak tells you that you're technically hanging out with a wild animal and you have to let him go. So you're forced to take him out to the woods and... Just kidding. You have to tell it goodbye over and over Airbud style.
Get out of here! Don't you understand? Get! I don't want you anymore!
Until it finally decides to go back to the wild and the credits roll. But once the credits are over, Pikachu just returns, because I guess that ending would have been too sad to commit to. As for the VRU, it didn't have much staying power as a product, only being used for one other game called Densha de Go 64. I'm sure this was loads of fun though. But at the same time, there was another subset of Pokemon merchandise that was selling by the boatloads, and that was the Pokemon trading cards. Its first set of cards launching in Japan in October of 1996. With 150 collectible Pokemon in-game, this was the perfect medium for the franchise to branch outside of just being a video game. But why not take this a step further? A video game about a card game about a video game. This is Pokemon Trading Card Game, the video game. First released in December of 1998 in Japan for Nintendo's latest handheld console at that time, the Game Boy Color. And this game has a whole story taking place on TCG Island, an island in the Pokemon world that seems to have the same shape as Ireland. But this location doesn't have much Pokemon inhabiting it. Instead, they all have cards based on Pokemon. And you play as Mark, a Pokemon trading card enthusiast who begins his adventure to become the TCG champion. Similarly to the setup in Pokemon Red and Blue, you meet with a professor named Dr. Mason, who gives you a choice of a starter deck instead of a starter Pokemon. And each deck is based around the original trio, Charmander, Squirtle, or Bulbasaur. And of course, you also have your snobby rival, with this one being named Ronald. But this kicks off your adventure to travel the region, battling other trading card players. Defeat the 8 Club Masters and you'll earn Master Medals that will allow you to take on the 4 Grandmasters, and finally the champion, who turns out to be, you guessed it, Ronald. And if you didn't guess that, I'm sorry for spoiling it for you. So beat for beat, this is structured exactly like the original Pokemon games, but at its core, there's actually a little bit more going on during battles, as it's heavily based on the rules of the actual trading card game. I won't be going into heavy detail on the card game rules, maybe that's something I'll leave for a proper TCG video, but each battle in this game is a lot lengthier than a regular Pokemon battle because of that. So as you play this game, you'll be building and improving your deck, with 228 cards being available within the game. All of these cards were directly pulled from the real trading card game, specifically from the first base set, jungle, and fossil expansions at that time. And beating opponents in the game would net you booster packs, which contain random cards that you can use to continue building that deck. You could even use the link cable to battle real-life players or trade cards. But this game did give you an incentive to use connectivity features. With this feature called Card Pop, players had the opportunity to obtain cards that you couldn't regularly get within the main game. Two players could connect via the infrared port on the Game Boy Color and get random cards with a chance to obtain Phantom cards, including Phantom Venusaur and Phantom Mew. And from what I'm seeing online, players couldn't card pop with the same partner until both players card popped with 15 other people, which I don't even think I had 15 friends with a Game Boy at this time. Since this game is one huge advertisement for the actual trading card game, it's probably not a surprise to you that it was produced by Tsunekazu Ishihara. As I mentioned before, Ishihara is the current president of the Pokemon Company, because this guy saw Pokemon for what it was, a merchandise and licensing cash cow. While Game Freak handled the development of the mainline titles, Nintendo would manage distribution and publishing, while Ishihara at Creatures Inc. took point on everything retail and licensing. And this included designing the trading card game. So if you think of Pokemon as a video game series, sure, it may have started as one, but today it has transformed into a merch mogul. To date, this franchise has raked in a total of $150 billion, with approximately over $100 billion of that being a result of licensed merchandise, trading cards included. So Ishihara is making all the right choices right out of the gate. And it's a pretty smart play to come out with a trading card game and then a video game to give you that feeling of missing out on the real card game. And I mean, they're still doing this now. Many of you watching probably got back into buying card packs by playing that gateway drug, Pokemon trading card game Pocket for mobile devices. Let me know in the comments if I'm right. But Pokemon trading card game for the Game Boy Color would be a success, selling over 600,000 copies in Japan by the end of 1999. This wouldn't arrive in North America until April of 2000, where it continued to perform, selling another 1.5 million copies during its first year. It would even get a Japanese exclusive sequel known as Pokemon Card GB2, Great Rocket Dansanjo. But we'll cover that in more detail when we get to spin-offs for Generation 2.
Something's gone wrong in the happy-go-lucky world of Nintendo.
It's now January 1999, and one of Nintendo's greatest experiments would hit the market in Japan. Super Smash Bros., a revolutionary fighting game developed by HAL Laboratory and directed by Kirby creator Masahiro Sakurai. The twist is that a bunch of characters from different Nintendo franchises would meet in the arena to beat the shit out of each other, including icons like Mario, Link, Donkey Kong, Fox, Samus, and Pokemon had its representation with none other than Pikachu and Jigglypuff. While this isn't a Pokemon spin-off, it deserves a mention because the representation here is pretty vast. On top of Pikachu being one of the 8 main characters available at the start of the game, Jigglypuff was included as an unlockable character, made available to the player after clearing one-player mode at any difficulty. So I know it's a no-brainer as to why Pikachu was included, but what's the story with Jigglypuff?
I beat the shit out one of these niggas, boy. Straight up.
Though Jigglypuff was extremely popular among Pokemon fans at that time, especially with its ongoing gag scenes in the anime, it was selected because of its convenience for development, as its shape and movement could easily fit into the already developed Kirby rubric. The rooftop of the Silphco building in Saffron City was the dedicated Pokemon stage, and I recall spending way too many hours here just for the gimmick of this elevator door. It could be a Porygon tackling the shit out of you or an Electrode just sitting there as a ticking time bomb before delivering a stage-clearing explosion. 5 possible Pokemon could emerge from this door, making it a hot spot for players to group up on the stage for the imminent chaos. But this little lottery system extended beyond just this stage through Pokeballs, becoming a staple item in Smash as well, with 13 different monsters ready to back up the player who threw the ball. And some Pokemon are better than others, like Snorlax, who will use Body Slam, which takes up a majority of the screen to damage your opponents. or Chansey, who will drop a bunch of eggs that contain useful items. Or you could get a Goldeen instead, who just flops on the stage with the move Splash, which is interesting because Splash isn't a move Goldeen can use in the actual Pokemon games. This ideally should have been Magikarp, but this is probably a direct reference to an episode of the anime where it's shown early on that Goldeen was useless outside of water. Whether it was Charizard's flamethrower or a rare Mew sighting that gave you useless points, this Pokeball mechanic was so perfect it remained a core part of Smash for over 25 years. And while Super Smash Bros. Kicked off 1999 for Pokemon on the N64, another major Pokemon spin-off would launch just 2 months later, Pokemon Snap. Released in Japan in March 1999 and July 1999 in North America, a game where you play as Todd Snap, a Pokemon photographer who goes out into the wild to get the best pictures possible for Professor Oak's research. And I mean, this game was everywhere. The playable displays at Best Buy, Toys R Us. I remember it being at the dentist's office for the kids while you waited. Not to mention they also promoted the hell out of it in the anime by introducing Todd as a travel buddy with Ash and the gang for a brief amount of time. Taking place in an undisturbed habitat for Pokemon called Pokemon Island, Todd and Oak will explore multiple ecosystems to collect high-quality pictures for his scientific findings. Todd will ride in a specialized buggy called the 01 to traverse 7 different ecosystems across the island, like the beach, a volcano, caves, tunnels, etc. The 01 is the story reason as to why this game is on rails, so the player won't be able to control where the buggy goes. The primary gameplay has the player moving around their camera instead, from a first-person perspective, as the 01 travels along a linear path. So as you look around, you have to snap the highest quality pictures of Pokemon you see along the way, which will be rated by Professor Oak at the end of the level. With 63 of the original 151 Pokemon in this game, there are a ton of options to take some banger photos. Extra points are awarded when you capture pictures of them during very specific poses, which requires the player to keep a very keen eye on each Pokemon or use accessories to manipulate situations to get them to strike those poses. For example, throw Pokemon food at this Pikachu and lead him over to this abandoned surfboard to make him a surfing Pikachu. No tedious conditions this time. Or you can be an asshole and knock this Charmeleon into a volcano, and he'll emerge as a whole-ass Charizard. This is the razzle-dazzle that made Pokemon Snap special. It takes it a step beyond a photography game by introducing these puzzle, problem-solving elements. All of this leading up to a secret course called Rainbow Cloud where you're supposed to take pictures of Mew, but you can't tell me this is not a boss fight trying to bring his little force field down so your camera can get a shot of him. So you snap the right photo of Mew and Professor Oak will abruptly tell you, "I have nothing left to teach you. See ya," and the game ends.
How come you don't want me, man?
I'm telling you guys right now, this would be an insane amusement park ride. Imagine you're on a track, taking pictures of Pokemon popping up around you in this on-rails experience, and then at the end, you get graded for the quality of the pictures you take. Nintendo, just add this. Do it. Pokemon Snap was another hit from HAL Laboratory, with some assistance from Japanese dev studio Pax Softnica, known for the greatest Game Boy Advance title of all time, Hamtaro, Ham Ham Heartbreak. But as polished as this game is, it almost didn't happen at all. Did you know this originally wasn't even a Pokemon game?
No.
Pokemon Snap actually started as a Jack and the Beanstalk game. A game based on the fairy tale where a guy named Jack plants magic beans that grow an enormous beanstalk that lead to a mystical land above the clouds. Maybe Mew's Rainbow Cloud World is leftovers from that project. But this was another game initially intended for the 64DD, and HAL Laboratory revealed Jack and the Beanstalk as far back as February 1995. Unfortunately, there are no existing screenshots or videos that were ever available or released to the public, so no one truly knows what this game would have looked or played like. But it was meant to utilize the power of the 64DD to its full extent. Strangely enough, the producers on the project, Miyamoto and Iwata included, recruited a developer lead named Yoichi Yamamoto, formerly a construction designer, with this being his very first video game. And he was recruited along with other non-video game personnel who had the interest in getting into the industry. This was an intentional move from both Iwata and Miyamoto, who started noticing game developers had a very negative outlook during development cycles and were almost never satisfied with the quality of their work. So they conducted an elaborate social experiment. What if we could get people who have an idea to create software that has never been done before and apply a different approach than what they normally do? Outsiders with background in different industries that can bring their specialty to game development. How many people are out there who would have the desire to make a game freely without being restricted by any organization. And so they appealed to Nintendo to support a hiring idea like this. 550 people applied, with a council of 4 spending several days going through all the applications until they locked in a proper team. And so Team Jack and Beans was born, which you can actually see credited in Pokémon Snap. And this team would be given no pressure for deadlines, just an experiment of putting talented people together to see what they come up with. It's fascinating to read Iwata and Miyamoto going back and forth in an interview about how they landed on this approach. As they mentioned, they were intentionally hands-off, even though they wanted to go to this team and start leading and managing it. But Jack and Beans would form this consensus-based democracy, with multiple leaders emerging that made decisions equally. And they decided photography would be the core part of the game, something that had never really been done before. But this rightfully caused some anxiety. Could they create a game solely around taking photos? How do they make it more game-like? Should it involve more action? And interestingly, Jack and Beans started to doubt their own ideas, while both Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka, his longtime partner in crime, both thought it would be something great. And despite the innovative foundation behind the photography gameplay, production slowed because Jack and Beans didn't know where to take the idea next. Not to mention they had the added challenge of developing on a brand new console with 3D graphics, which was just taking off at that time. Morale was all over the place until Nintendo decided the game would be built within the world of Pokémon, and this made the next steps clear. The team also had the idea of giving the player the ability to print the pictures they took within the game, and other parts of HAL Laboratory jumped in to help them make that idea a reality. Approaching Lawson, a convenience store chain in Japan that would have players bring their cartridge in to print their in-game pictures as stickers. And this exact system would later be implemented in North America at the popular video store chain Blockbuster.
You can even bring your Snap cartridge to a participating Blockbuster video and print out stickers of your favorites.
Ultimately, the support for 64DD would be dropped soon after, but despite this, Pokémon Snap would be released in cartridge form for the N64. And it was in the top 10 best-selling games in Japan the week of its release, and when it arrived in North America, it not only sold 1.5 million copies its first year, but was also the most rented video game in America for 3 solid months. So though Pokémon Snap feels like just another successful Pokémon spin-off, there was much more happening behind the scenes for this game. A game built from the concept of getting a set of diverse individuals together to see how they could innovate, which has convinced me that's why this game feels so refreshing and genuine. I'm curious to know how many people knew about the Jack and the Beanstalk thing. That's definitely some solid Nintendo lore right there. And after 22 years, Pokémon Snap would finally get a sequel title, New Pokémon Snap, released in April of 2021 for the Nintendo Switch. Maybe someday I'll cover this one. But just 1 month after Pokémon Snap, along with Smash Bros. Gave N64 players plenty to chew on, Pokémon was still attacking its home turf with Pokémon Pinball for the Game Boy Color. Released in April of 1999 in Japan and June 1999 in North America. I remember the idea of this was wacky for me as a kid, but I was dumb because there's literally a pinball table for everything. So why not a video game about pinball about Pokemon? Developed by Jupiter, known for Mario's Picross and the software for the Game Boy camera, they joined hands with HAL Laboratory to deliver this pinball game on crack. I have to stress that this does not feel like just a pinball game. Because sure, you play pinball and you get points, but as you're playing, you're working toward filling your Pokédex with all 151 Pokémon. An end goal in my pinball? This is the thing I feel is missing from so many pinball games. Like, getting the high score is cool, but why am I doing this? If I don't care about bragging rights, then what then? Pokémon Pinball somehow ingeniously incorporates catching Pokémon and collecting them over time, along with pinball mechanics. There were 2 playable tables in the game, red and blue, based on the original games, each with their own locations that determine what Pokemon could be caught. You can trigger catch mode, which gives you the chance to capture a Pokemon in that location. Hit a few bumpers to uncover the Pokemon's image, then it will appear on the board. Hit it 4 times with your Pokeball Pinball, and it's caught. This is just mwah. You could even evolve Pokemon too by activating evolution mode. Select a Pokemon you caught during that session, and hit a series of targets, land the ball into the hole in the board to evolve that Pokemon. I only meant to play this game for an hour or 2 to prepare myself for this video, and ended up wasting a whole night. But of course it had me ask myself if there is a real-life Pokemon pinball machine with these mechanics built in. And I was shocked to find out an official Pokemon machine has never existed after all this time. As of this month, there's rumors circulating that pinball machine manufacturer Stern Pinball is working on a Pokemon pinball machine for a 2026 release. But until there's an official announcement, I'd take that with a grain of salt. Considering there's a pinball machine for every other franchise out there, it has to be a matter of time until the most successful intellectual property in the world has one, right? Because I'm getting tired of seeing the same Simpsons, Star Wars, South Park, and Jurassic Park machines at my local arcades. Please, let's get some new blood in here. Pikachu! The team at Jupiter was also working on a Pokemon Picross game for the Game Boy Color that was intended to be released around this time. If you're not familiar with Picross, it's a puzzle game that takes place on a grid, and you're tasked with deciphering clues given to you to punch out the right squares on that grid to form an image. Similarly to Pokemon Pinball, you would have completed puzzles to uncover specific Pokemon, which would have then been added to your Pokédex. And through the Game Boy printer, players would have been able to print their completed puzzles. But the title was never released and cancelled, though a playable prototype of the game would be found and released online back in September of 2020. Despite this setback, Jupiter would eventually circle back to this idea and release an official Pokemon Picross game for the Nintendo 3DS in December of 2015, complete with 312 different puzzles.
Then a conquering hero is raised to victory. Sky high.
So now we've come full circle, back to Pokemon Stadium, or technically Pocket Monster Stadium 2 in Japan. Not to be confused, of course, with Pokemon Stadium 2 that we got in North America, because that is actually Pocket Monster Stadium Gold and Silver in Japan.
Shut up!
Anyway, released in April 1999 in Japan and March 2000 in North America, Pokemon Stadium was Nintendo learning from Pocket Monster Stadium and provided fans with a much more finished product. In all honesty, this is more of an expansion of the original game, as animations haven't changed and the battle system is identical, but this time players could battle with all 151 species of Pokemon from Generation 1, a stark difference from the initial 40. And with all of these added Pokemon were new modes to battle, with the original tournaments evolving into Stadium mode, a mode with 4 different cups, each having their own rule sets and constraints, with 4 levels of difficulty for each. If this wasn't enough for you, you could head over to the brand new Gym Leader Castle, a gauntlet of battles against several trainers and all the Kanto gym leaders, along with the Elite Four and the final showdown with your rival. Win all the battles and you're rewarded with a rare Pokemon that could be transferred into your Pokemon Red, Blue, or Yellow games. Remember in my previous video those moments where you had to select a Pokemon that locked you out of the other option permanently? Like Hitmonlee. Then you had to pray you ran into someone who could trade you a Hitmonchan to complete your Pokedex. Well, introverted kids rejoice, as you could win one of those Pokemon if you beat the Gym Leader Castle, including the other starter Pokemon between Squirtle, Bulbasaur, and Charmander that you didn't select at the beginning of the game. Speaking of which, transfer pack features were enhanced even more with the added Pokemon Lab. Connect to your Pokemon Red, Blue, or Yellow game and you could access your Pokemon stored in your PC and quickly organize them, because Lord knows how tedious that was in the actual game. If you had 2 transfer packs, you could even use Stadium to facilitate trades and handle all the logistics on a more powerful console. Complete the Gym Leader Castle in Stadium mode and the game will fulfill its promise on that egregious to be continued ending from the first game. Mewtwo will appear in the sky on the main menu, and you can fight against it with up to 6 Pokemon from your team. Sitting at an astounding level 100 with some of the most annoying moves in the game like Psychic, Blizzard, and Rest, this is the game's final challenge. And once you're victorious, the credits finally roll. Wait, what? Round 2? And it's nighttime? Round 2 refreshes the entire game. You can face all trainers in all modes once again, but this time, they're packing different and stronger Pokemon. And the difficulty is ramped up. So you had to buckle in and get through that Gym Leader Castle again in some of the most difficult Pokemon battles out there. Once again, conquer Stadium mode. Don't forget to bring your Pikachu so you can learn Surf. And finally, you can face Mewtwo once again. You exhaust every last Pokemon on your team, but you bring him down. The prize here must be insane. It's stickers. You can go print them out at Blockbuster on that Pokemon Snap Station, but yeah, it's stickers. Regardless, this game is such an improvement over its original that it makes a lot of sense that this was the first Stadium game we received in North America. But I saved the best edition for last. The Kids Club. These minigames were some of the most addictive, rage-baiting, creative little nuggets of goodness at that time. Holy shit. 9 unique minigames, each incorporating the potential everyday life of specific Pokemon species. You could compete against 3 other friends to dig underground with Sandshrew, or see which Magikarp could splash the best. discover who could harden it the most in Rock Harden,
What was that last one?
or race to put your friends to sleep by timing your button presses as drowsy. These are all extremely well thought out minigames that were hard to put down. But at the top of this list was Clefairy Says and Sushi Go Round. I know the sound effects for both of these games still exist in your DNA. Clefairy Says is essentially Simon Says, where you have to use the control pad to repeat the pattern back to the teacher. The one who messes up the least wins. Even though it's just Simon Says, it's packaged with that aesthetic. And it was crazy to see this Clefairy teacher slap the shit out of these kids. Sushi Go Round stars a cunniling group of Lickitung who decide to eat out today.
What?
All you can eat sushi is on the menu and you have to control your... I'm sorry. All you can eat sushi is on the menu and you have to control your Lickitung to collect plates to rack up the most expensive bill at this restaurant. There are several different plates of sushi, some more expensive than others, with the most expensive being the uni, or sea urchin plate, which is overall less likely to be served. And as you're eating these, it's best to avoid the green tea, which ends up being too hot. And you'll also have to be mindful of spicier foods that will slow you down. The sound effects on this level deserve an award in itself, and this has to be my favorite game of the bunch. So Pokemon Stadium I still think is the quintessential Pokemon spin-off of this time period, and probably the game most people think about when they think of Gen 1 spin-offs. So Pokemon Stadium was the final spin-off in Japan until they released the long-awaited sequel to Pokemon Generation 1 titles in November of 1999. Pocket Monsters Gold and Silver. But we're not covering this masterpiece of a game in this video. Give me some time to do that one justice. In North America, however, we'd have to wait another year before we got these titles. And there was one last spin-off we'd receive in September of 2000.
Do you have the coordination to be Pokemon Puzzle Master? Do you have what it takes to face your toughest opponent yet? The Wall.
Pokemon Puzzle League. Released for the Nintendo 64, this Pokemon puzzle-themed title is a strange one, because it was exclusive to North America, Australia, and Europe, and never received a release in Japan. And this one specifically takes place within the Pokemon anime universe, with the voice actors from the American version of the show lending their voices for the characters in-game.
Hi, Professor Oak.
Hello, Ash. I have an important message for you.
Puzzle League opens like another episode of the show, with Ash and Pikachu vacationing before Professor Oak calls him to present him with a special invitation. Ash has been selected as one of the challengers to the official Puzzle League tournament, which seems kinda random because a Puzzle League has nothing to do with Pokemon trainers, as we'll soon see. But Ash will join the tournament in Pokemon Puzzle League Village, going head-to-head in ass-gripping puzzle challenges against the Kanto gym leaders, earning badges along the way. Gameplay-wise, this is essentially a spiritual successor to the Super Nintendo's Tetris Attack, also known as Panel de Pon, a game where you match 3 or more blocks of the same color to destroy them to avoid filling up the screen. And as you combo on your side, your opponent is gifted large blocks of trash to make things more stressful for them. Essentially, it's Puyo Puyo. But they would even pull songs directly from the American version of the show. Yes, including "We're on the road to Viridian City, the road."
That shit is fucking trash, dog. Get the fuck.
Pokemon Puzzle League was developed by an American subsidiary of Nintendo known as Nintendo Software Technology based in Washington. This little studio of 50 people is still operating today and worked on games like the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series and F-Zero 99. So the plot that I mentioned earlier is part of Puzzle League's one-player story mode, but of course it has two-player mode where you can take on friends with a choice of 16 playable characters from the anime, including Ash, Misty, and Brock, members of Team Rocket, Gary, etc. So while the puzzle elements here are pretty simple, they added this fancy 3D mode to flex that N64 goodness, where you're now matching blocks on a cylinder instead. Of course, there are other modes in here to switch up the gameplay a bit, like Time Zone, where you're racing against the clock for a high score, or an endless mode called Marathon. But you're probably wondering where the Pokemon come into play. Well, they're in the background while you play? Alright, it's not just that. When you get combos, you'll see large blocks of your Pokemon's element hit the opponent's side. Still, something about this game just doesn't feel right. I get this uncanny free CD in the cereal box feeling when I look at this. Like, you know when companies first started going ham with flash games on the early internet like Cartoon Network and General Mills? Don't get me wrong, I loved those games, but I wouldn't have gone to Toys R Us to buy them. So similarly, Puzzle League lacks that soul. Still, I love a good puzzle game, and like most puzzle games at this time, the CPUs start to cheat at higher difficulties. And I guess one player mode is where the meat of this game exists. Much like the original games, you'll have to defeat all the gym leaders, 2 members of the Elite Four for some reason, maybe because Agatha and Lance hadn't appeared in the anime in the US at that point, and the champion, Gary Oak. There are a few difficulties available to the player ranging from easy to super hard, with the higher difficulties having to be unlocked. There is some banter between Ash and his opponents between rounds, Puyo Puyo style, but not much to write home about here. If AI generated text existed at this time, I'd accuse them of using it, but boring writing has always existed, so it's here. But once Ash defeats Gary, there's this cutscene where Mewtwo opens up a wormhole in Ash's trophy and hauls him into his domain to take him on in a riveting match of Panel de Pon. Out of all the interesting experimental spin-offs we covered today, this one felt like the biggest stretch when it came to mapping Pokemon onto it. And after a very difficult puzzle fight, Ash defeats Mewtwo and is warped back to their vacation spot, to which Ash for some reason thinks all of that was a dream?
Guess it was just a dream.
Why? Pikachu has common sense though and shows that they still have their Puzzle Master trophy, and the game ends. This was the official close to Generation 1 globally, as Pokemon Gold and Silver was on the horizon with a brand new region in store, additional Pokemon, and overall, it was a much more ambitious game. And I can't wait to cover this one, as this game was one of the shining moments of my childhood. Thank you again to all the members that support the channel on Patreon and YouTube. I've been loving all the comments from you guys as of late, so stay strapped in. I'll see all of you next time.